Meeting of the board of May 15, 2024 to order. We're meeting today, of course, on the traditional lands and territories of the Sonish people who have lived, learned, worked, and cared for these lands for millennia. And so we offer this acknowledgement, gratitude, and with respect. I wish to welcome members of the management team who are joining the board for the meeting tonight. We have regrets from Superintendent Eberwin, who has had to leave for a very uplifting event. We have Secretary Treasurer Reed. To my left, Assistant Superintendent McKenzie, Director of Instruction Hunter, and Director of Instruction Westhaver. I'm also pleased to note that we have Mr. Ryan Ellis with us, representing the Saanich Administrators Association. Welcome, Ryan. I also expected other partner representatives. Perhaps they'll join us in due course. Mr. Peterson, President of the Saanich Teachers Association, Ms. Wanless or Ms. Visitor for COPAX, and perhaps Candace Whitney for QP 441. But if they do come in, they're welcome. Let's move then to the adoption of the agenda, trustees. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda? Trustee Hickman, second by Trustee Vandal. Are there any late items or proposed revisions? All in favor of adoption of the agenda is circulated. Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. This is to advise also that prior to this regular meeting, the board held an in-camera meeting and discussed business affairs and personnel matters. Moving then to minutes, and specifically the regular board meeting minutes of April 24, 2024. Are there any errors or omissions to the minutes of that meeting of April 24, 2024? Hearing none, I declare that the minutes be adopted as circulated. There's no business arising from the minutes. This evening, there are no presentations or delegations. Since you're the only guest with us, Mr. Ellis, this is an opportunity for questions from partners or guests. And I offer you that opportunity if you have any.
Oh, actually, I love this.
Only two.
No, I don't have any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Reed. We also need to adopt the minutes of the special budget meeting of May 8, 2024. And I'll ask if there are any errors or omissions with respect to that. Trustee McMurphy? All right, is there a second or third option? Trustee Van Well, all in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Those minutes are adopted by motion. No other partners, no questions. We'll move then to item 6, which is the report from the chair. And we're aware, I think, of the time since our regular meeting of April and our budget meeting of May 8 has been compressed. And we're also looking forward to the end of the school year in June and those celebrations. And so there are fewer matters on which to report this month. There are examples to be sure. For instance, we know that in the background, the work on Bill 40 continues, and the work on restricting cell phone use by students in class continues with the guidance of the ministry. We know too that student voice sessions are wrapping up for this year to be continued next year. We are continuing to foster our relationship with the Saanich School Board and planning a September retreat of the two boards together. And of course, we're looking forward to our secondary school recognition graduation ceremonies in June. And I wish to thank trustees for making themselves available to bring greetings on behalf of the board to those events. And I promise to provide the list of assignments shortly. Thank you for your offers of availability and preferences, and principally, I think, leaving the discretion with me. But the most significant work, of course, of late has been the development of the preliminary budget for 2024-2025. And I expect that we'll address its completion by adoption of the bylaw in our June meeting. This is the most significant annual undertaking, regular undertaking of the board each year. There are, for sure, other projects that take a lot of time. I think, by way of example, the Shishisha Child Care Center, the policy review of a year or two ago, the transportation policy review, which was completed recently, which take a lot of energy, effort, and time. But regularly, the development of the preliminary budget is the business that takes a lot of consultation. And so necessarily our development process is appropriately lengthy and careful in this, starting with the guidelines and the timelines and the guiding principles adopted by the board, and then entering the consultation process also approved by the board, which of course involves advice from the Budget Advisory Committee, Student Voice, the Wasanich communities, the community budget meeting, our partners, and work at the Finance, Facilities and Technology Committee. The process this year has demonstrated difficulties, but also provided us with a consensus that led to our decisions on May the 8th to avoid reductions and to use this year the contingency. And the process also focused on an increased advocacy role for the board. And that's what I want to focus on for a moment as a matter that I have been reflecting on in recent times as we've engaged in the budget development process. As we approach the completion of that and the school end, it's timely to again consider what is really a critical role for the board and hasn't always received the profile and the emphasis that it might. Historically, until recently, advocacy by the board has been somewhat ad hoc, usually at budget time about the budget. Occasionally, it specifically addressed other projects. And I'm thinking, for instance, of the Open Student Information System of some years ago, where the entire board met with the Minister of the Day about that. But it tended to be perceived, advocacy tended to be perceived as on an as-needed, when-needed basis. But more recently, the board has taken a more cohesive and continuing interest in elevating its advocacy role. We were reminded recently that we have an advocacy plan that attaches Appendix B to Policy 2, the role of the board. It's entitled Advocacy for Public Education. It was adopted by us 1 year ago in May 2023. And while it focuses on money, as is naturally the case for so much of our advocacy, it may be time to consider a review. It focused on 5 steps or 5 elements of our work in financial advocacy. First, continuing to build awareness and informed relationships. Second, to seek meetings with the Ministry of Education and Childcare, ministry staff, and members of the Legislative Assembly of our constituency, to encourage the leadership of affiliated organizations such as BCSDA, BCSSA, BC ASBO, and BC CPAC to support us in the quest for appropriate funding and an appropriate funding model, to encourage our internal allies, particularly our parents and partners, to inform them of our successes and our challenges, to promote advocacy, and to create and take advantage of opportunities to meet with local government and partners such as Beacon Community Services to support our common interests. And while we want to bear this plan in mind, and some of its goals have been achieved, and of course there's more work to be done, we also want to adjust our thinking beyond merely budget advocacy and merely financial budget time advocacy. To that end, recently the board's adopted 2 motions about that. The first was to direct staff to develop a plan regarding our structural budget deficit reporting in the fall of 2024, which is much earlier, of course, than we would normally engage in advocacy for the budget. And that is because using our contingency to balance our budget is not sustainable, and we need to look at other options. The second was passed last meeting was to develop a plan to advocate for funding well in advance of, again, the budget time, but budget deliberations. And that was aimed for the fall as well. And so we've adopted these expansionary efforts with respect to our financial advocacy, but we've also taken a broader approach. For example, we've expressed students' interest in advocacy on our behalf. We've received various letters from the schools to the minister. We've received copies of letters from various parents to the minister. We've engaged with 6 similar districts in common circumstances for a joint letter and joint efforts to lobby the minister. And those districts too are also lobbying the Minister of Finance. And so I'm encouraging us as a board to think not only in broader timelines and engagement as per these examples, but also in a broader scope too. Not only in funding, critical though it is to what we do. There are some questions in our communities in the province about the relevance of school boards and what we do. There's a good deal of ignorance in what we do. Thank you, Trustee. There are questions, for instance, put to us saying, why are you involved in the school board when you no longer have children in school? As if the work of boards is narrowed to your own children. There are questions about advocacy for finances that I've received over the years. Why are you advocating for more money? You're given money by the ministry. Your job is to decide where it's allocated. There are questions that arise from time to time, particularly at budget time, of revenue generation. And we want to be very, very careful with those, I say respectfully, because we're not a business. We're not a for-profit enterprise. We are a public service funded by taxes. And so while there may be areas, in my respectful view, that a board might consider for some funding, there are dangers in that, and it's not necessarily appropriate in any case. So I'm thinking, friends, that there are many in our communities who may not be properly informed of our successes apart from the achievements of individual students, and perhaps unthinking of the direct connection between our work and the successes that are attached to the definition of an educational plan in the School Act. And I've mentioned this before, but I'll quote it again. An educational program is designed to enable learners to become literate, to develop their individual potential, and to acquire the knowledge and skills and attitudes needed to contribute, emphasis mine, to a healthy, democratic, and pluralistic society, and a prosperous and sustainable economy. Many times we talk about student success, enhancing their options, but we don't often focus on the strengthening of our democratic process as much as we might. And we certainly never talk about educating for a prosperous and sustainable economy, which the legislators thought sufficient and appropriate to include. And so I suspect that our communities don't have really a full understanding of the scope of our mandate and the importance, as I've expressed it, what we do beyond individual schools. Under that umbrella, to achieve all this, appropriate funding is critical, of course, and is overarching, and every effort we must continue to obtain a proper funding model and proper payment, proper grants. But our advocacy must not stop there, I say with respect. It should incorporate human resources concerns, recruitment and retention, capital projects, delayed repair, technology, planning, educational initiatives, fostering our relationships, some of which don't depend entirely on funding. And we should be able to inform our communities of all these elements as it is appropriate. Because trumpeting our successes and explaining our difficulties for our work is in fact advocacy. because it leads to understanding and it leads to support. So as we continue to develop, enhance, and broaden our advocacy role, let's reflect at every meeting, every decision, every issue, what part it may play in strengthening our work, in strengthening our advocacy as we think about broadening it, and strengthening our democracy and our communities. Thank you. We do not have a superintendent's report tonight in the absence of the superintendent. And so we'll move on then to school successes, which are attached in the package. And I understand, Trustee McMurphy, you have something to say
I would
about
like
that.
to add a success to the list, which just happened on Monday, and that is the wonderful concert that was put on in Brentwood in part by all the music students in the secondary and middle schools. It was great to see all of the kids, all the teachers, and the not only the quality of the music, but also the comportment of the students. It was just a wonderful morning, and I was joined by Trustees Silzer and Van Laird as well. And it was just a treat, and I think they showcased Saanich in a very beautiful, compelling, and thoughtful and moving way.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Trustee McMurphy. Anything else on school successes? Thank you. Then we'll move on to the committee reports. First, the Education and Directions Committee with Committee Chair Silzer.
The Education Directions Committee had two presentations. The first was concerning anti-racism innovation at Wattside Elementary School. And the committee received a presentation from Wattside teachers, principal Selena Carr, Henrietta Langen Debrise, and Jenica Moore. It was very heartwarming, actually, and inspiring. The ways in which the teachers have engaged the ELL students, many of whom are refugees, with empathy interviews to find out where the students are and how they feel they belong to the school community, and the ways in which their belonging is fostered. So it's very inspirational presentation. And the second presentation was from Director of Instruction, Hardy Hunter, and the Indigenous Principal, Melissa Austin. And we received a report on how we're doing with respect to Indigenous students' data. So that was very enlightening as well. And that essentially concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Trustee Silzer? Thank you, Trustee Silzer. We'll move on then to Finance, Facilities, and Technology. Trustee Elder has sent his regrets he couldn't be with us, and so I'll turn to the committee member, Trustee Hickman, to give the report this evening, please.
Thank you, Chair. The Finance, Facility, and Technology Committee Day, we did not have any presentations or items for discussion. We do have an item for recommendation. And this is with regards to the Brentwood Child Care Portable. There's a motion here. The committee recommends, and I, Trustee Hickman, move that the board approve replacement of the Brentwood Child Care Portable being portable using available funds in the local capital reserve.
Seconded by Trustee Murphy. Anything to say about it, Trustee Hickman?
Well, there was an attachment to the FF&T report made available, but just to highlight the fact that we have a portable that is splitting in half. And so that creates a situation of urgency. And so that was, I think, the impetus for us to want to move forward with this as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Any further discussion or comment, trustees? I'll put the question then. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you.
And then we have a report from the Budget Advisory Committee. The following motions were moved on May 8th, 2024 at the special budget meeting. Do you want me to go through each of these?
Yes, we do.
Okay. The first was that the 2024-2025 budget be balanced by allocating $922,967 in contingency reserve to fund the budgetary items outlined in the following table. So we have medical dental plan premium escalations at $585,168. CPP premium escalation, $141,023. Forecasted increase to average teacher wage, $300,000. Technology plan budget shortfall, $500,000. And unavoidable service and supply inflation at $167,000. When we take those items and deduct the net funding growth of $763,224, we have an unfunded inflationary pressure of $922,967. The next is that staff be directed to create a plan with options to address the structural budget shortfall with a report provided to the board in the fall of 2024. And also that the board express its appreciation to the Budget Advisory Committee, community members who participated at the community budget meeting and survey, and students who participated in student voice sessions. Okay, and then moving along, we've got items for information, fiscal forecast. There was nothing new to share on that. And the Facetious Child Care Center update. Actually, we received an email after the committee meeting from Secretary Treasurer Reid letting us know that not only had they received license from VHA, but they were also awaiting inspection of their kitchen. And the anticipated opening would be May 21st. Are there any new? No, nothing new on that? Okay, great. And then we have future agenda items. The 2025-26 capital plan submission will be coming in June. Updated long-range facilities plan in June. Review of trustee remuneration in June. And review guidance regarding audit committee responsibilities in June.
Thank you. Anything arising, trustees? All right. Thank you, Trustee Aiken. There is no human resources report at this meeting and no policy development report since the committee did not meet this month. There are reports from trustee representatives. I know that there is a COPAX report of the COPAX meeting. Did I miss anything? Is there anybody else? Trustee McMurphy and I attended on behalf of the board last week to the COPAX meeting, and so I'll invite Trustee McMurphy to speak to that.
Yes, the main focus of our report to COPAX was reflected the decisions the board had made the night before with regard to the budget, and we feel the COPAX executive and whoever was on there, this was all executive, on what was happening with the budget and what was going forward with that, and then the other part wasn't not from the board, but from Pete Westhaver and Paul McKenzie and someone else. Just the two of you on technology in classrooms and the use of personal mobile devices and the policy that, or the administrative procedure that is being worked on to provide some guidance there. And there's also something coming up later on our agenda about student use of personal digital devices. Mobile communication devices is on our agenda for information. I think we also expressed at the meeting, our appreciation to COPAX for the help that they've given us through the budget process. And I think there's a fairly, I would say there's a reasonably good understanding in the parent community about the difficulties we're facing and the remedies that we've found, resorted to try to balance our budget and work that involved so many people was so much appreciated.
Thank you. Any questions for Trustee McMurphy or comments, Trustee? Thank you, Trustee McMurphy. We'll move then to item 14, correspondence, and the first three items are letters from staff, school staff committees, which have a common theme with respect to health and wellness. Trustees, you will recall that last month we had received and addressed several as well. The motion last month was that the staff committees be advised by me or on my behalf that Superintendent Everwin would be responding substantively to those. That was a motion you made, Trustee Hickman. I suggest that may be an appropriate way to deal with these tonight as well. And trustees receive copies of the correspondence, but I'm in the board's hands.
Do we need to move the same motion as the last?
You can do whatever you like, but that motion applied only to the correspondence last month.
Oh, okay.
So these are new.
He's pulling up the motion.
You note from last month?
Sure.
Last month, the motion was that the board chair respond to each school staff committee letter advising of the understanding that the superintendent will reply substantively to them with regard to the health and wellness manager position.
Trustee Hickman,
Yes, I'd like to repeat that motion again tonight, please.
that's your motion?
Yes.
Is there Trustee McMurphy, second?
Second, I want to put it in as well.
Okay. So it's seconded. Trustee McMurphy, you're next with an amendment.
I would like to move that the board be copied on the correspondence.
Is there any objection to including that in the motion? And that's done by unanimous agreement. So we have a motion identical to last month's, but adding that the board be copied. Is there any discussion on the amended motions, trustees?
This was not in the motion, but I'm assuming that the response that goes to these letters would be the same as the one that was sent earlier. And so it's not necessary at this point to ask for copies of the earlier correspondence.
I would expect it would be identical.
It'd be nice to know.
Well, I think the superintendent committed to providing the board with copies of last month's correspondence, because that got missed somehow. So this one is now part of the motion. So I think between the two, between the commitment and the motion, we'll have a full package.
Great, thanks.
All in favor, trustees? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. We then, fourth, have a letter from the Sandwich Teachers Association with respect to the method of advising staff of administrative appointments. I understand Assistant Superintendent McKenzie, you're prepared to speak to that?
Through the chair, yes. I read with interest the correspondence. Through the chair, the sort of rationale, this has been a practice, I think, here in the district for a number of years in terms of messaging that goes out from the district, and correspondence that went out subsequent to the in-camera meeting on the previous evening on behalf of the chair was dedicated to messaging to the entire district, the appointments of and changes administratively. And the purpose behind that is around consistency of messaging and consistency of timing of messaging. And I think that the respecting those two things are key pieces in messaging. As the correspondence from the Sandwich Teachers Association, these are obviously impactful messages that are, have consequence and impact at the schools, but across the district. And so messaging with consistency around the individuals in the schools involved, but also the timing of that. And it's typically early in the morning, prior to the start of the school day, is also to respect the business of the work during the day. And so those are the key kind of premises underneath the messaging and the consistency of it.
Thank you. Any questions with respect to that, Trustee Whitman?
This isn't new, and so I'm wondering what happened this time to raise the concerns that we are hearing in this letter.
I'm not aware that there was any change in practice or experience.
Again, through the chair, I believe this has been certainly the practice for the last number of years. So there's nothing different in this.
All right. Thank you, Ms. McKenzie. Anything further on this, trustees? Right, then sorry.
In the SK letters, it is encouraged that this return to past practice, the staff will be notified by their own leadership.
That is not past practice, or it is past practice, or when was it past practice?
Yeah, through the chair, I probably can't speak to that past practice because it preceded my time serving.
Mr. Reid?
Yeah, my understanding is would have been practice with the previous superintendent, so we're talking 7 years ago.
Too bad. Mr. Peterson's in here.
All right, thank you. If there's nothing further on that item, the fourth letter is from Ms. Brody, the chair of West Vancouver Schools. And you'll recall we've spoken of this on a previous occasion. It was offered to us as an example of the correspondence that a board might send to both the Minister of Education and Childcare and the Minister of Finance with respect to both the funding model and unfunded inflationary costs. It doesn't seem to me that it calls for a response. I thank Ms. Brody for it and acknowledge receipt.
Send another one with our name on it.
The joint letter has gone, and that's been provided to us all, and also to all of the districts who participated, with their logos and their chair signatures. But Mr. Reid, have we received an acknowledgement from the ministry yet for any of that correspondence?
It's been received, but we gotta see everything else.
And no response.
No response.
Hopefully they'll be forthcoming as part of our advocacy. And then there is an email from COPAX of April 30, 2024, proposing some additional funding. Mr. Reid, do you have any comment?
Yeah, through the chair, this was an email originally that went to the budget advisory committee. And in consultation with the chair of the budget advisory committee, Trustee Elder, we determined that the best course of action was to move this request directly to the board because it's a request that the annual funding allocation at COPAX be increased from $2,500, which has been in place for probably about 6 or 7 years, to increase that amount to $3,500 to reflect many years of inflation. It is a $1,000 request that could be found in the estimated inflationary adjustment already built into the budget, so it's not a large amount of money, and so we felt this wasn't something that should be discussed at budget advisory, but something discussed at the board table instead.
Yes, I would have thought that the request would come to the board first. Trustee McLeod.
I would like to move that the board approve an increase in the annual budget to COPAX to $3,500 per annum.
Seconded by Trustee Silzer. You, Trustee McMurphy, wish to speak to it?
Well, the Secretary Treasurer made part of the argument in that it hasn't had an increase for a long time. It's $1,000 in a $110 million budget. I think.
Anybody else? I would note that.
Oh, sorry, but the important thing is COPAX does great work for and with the district, and I think that's worth recognizing in a small amount of money like this.
Yes. And if the problem arises from unfunded inflationary costs, I think it's appropriate that we help them with that, since we're asking for that too. Trustee Silser.
Yes, and, COPAX also receives money from the community gaming organization, from the BC government. But we don't know their total budget, but of course, we support this motion.
That rounds up the picture for us, Trustee Silser. Any other comment or question, Trustee? I'll put the question then on the motion to increase the budget by budget, was that the word or grant? Would you read it, Mr. Reed, please? Yes.
Maybe it's better if you read it. Okay. Okay.
She did it really fast.
Trustee McMurphy will read it.
I'm sorry.
I
Got
have
most of
something,
it.
I have something I can read out, but
Yeah, me too, but
Well, let's go to the mover.
let's go to her.
Let's go to.
Yeah, sorry, it was very fast.
To say that the board approved the request of Colfax for an increase in the annual budget of $1,000. And I think I said annual grant, not annual budget.
All right, granted is. Granted is, because, yeah, we don't know about their budget. All right, trustees, all in favor of that? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. And then item 15 is our second opportunity for questions from partner groups. And not seeing any, we shall move on to item 16, other business as submitted. And that's with respect to the next school year's committee and board meeting schedule. And Mr. Reed, can you help us with that?
thank you, Chair. In the board's annual work plan is the approval of the committee and board meeting dates at this board meeting for the following school year. These dates are entirely consistent with the dates this year. You will see that the board planning day is December 5th. The board planning day this year did end up being in late February, but that was because of weather, I believe. It was originally planned to be close to that date this year, and so this schedule is consistent with that of last year.
Any questions or comments? Is there a motion to approve the schedule? Trustee Hickman? You'd move that the 2024-25 committee and board meeting schedule be approved?
Yes, please.
Seconded by Trustee McMurphy. Discussion, trustees, on the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Reed. And then item 17 is an item for information, Administrative Procedure 512, mobile communication devices. Staff, who is going to speak to that? Mr. Reed?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Trustee McMurphy spoke earlier about an administrative procedure under development for use of mobile devices by students. This is also a mobile device administrative procedure, but this is different in that this is relating to the management of district mobile devices used by staff. And this is an administrative procedure that I would say has actually been under development for 4 or 5 years as we note areas of inconsistent application, as questions come up about how who, in what circumstances should a staff member have a district phone, what district phone should a staff member have, if there are incremental personal costs, those have to be reimbursed. So these are questions that have come up frequently, and Director of Finance Neglia and myself have actually been developing guidelines for a number of years, and we decided it was appropriate to put them in an administrative procedure just to make sure everybody knows what the rules are and that they're consistently applied.
Trustee Vandal and then Trustee McMurphy.
Chair, just a question, how many cell phones are out there?
And it is for, give me the percentage.
How many district phones?
Yeah. Wow.
Directors Siniglia would know that.
Okay.
Yeah, administrators have them, most excluded staff have them. Staff members that are not working in a single location, like itinerant staff, if the guidelines, employees that conduct 50% of their work in the field and do not have desk space, because they don't have a desk phone, they would get a mobile phone as well. So, yeah, if you look under 1.2, it's kind of the criteria of when somebody will get a district phone. I'm not sure of the exact number of phones.
Is there any allocated for school?
No, it's not, it's allocated really based on position. So the principal would have a phone, the vice principal would have a phone. Staff members generally don't have phones unless we determine, for example, that they don't have a single work location and we need to reach them throughout the day. Basically, if they require it to meet their job duties, then that's when they would have a phone, when there's basically a business purpose. That question of business purpose came up quite frequently, and we had developed these guidelines over time, but now they're reflected in this administrative procedure.
Trustee McMurphy and then trustee Silsby.
I presume this has been discussed at various levels with the people appropriate to the discussion staff at all levels that may be affected by this. It's already went through that discussion. Thank you. And this is, I'm taking a bit of a liberty here, but seem to be working a lot on policy in the area of mobile communication, personal digital devices, that kind of thing. And one of the things that keeps coming up in my mind when I look at things, this has got nothing to do with the motion on the floor, sorry, I'm just trying to sneak it in, is I hope that we're considering the provision of personal communication devices to kids who don't have them if they need them. This talks about staff, but there are kids, there's a lot of expectation now that kids will have their own communication devices of some sort or another if they're at more senior levels, and I'm just hoping that somewhere along the line, we're going to have to realize that, it's like a textbook or other learning resource material or anything else. We're going to have to make sure that if we're going to use personal communication devices in schools, we have to make sure that everybody that needs one has got one. So just as we communicated and discussed with people here, and we provide them what they need immediately, we're thinking about that for students.
So trustee McMurphy is edging us into something else, but I know that you've been instrumental in working on that. Assistant Superintendent Mackenzie, I'm inviting you to comment if you wish.
Sure, through the chair, it's presently we're Director of Instruction West Haver and I are working through as a requirement of the recent ministry announcement around use of cell phones or personal digital devices, requirement to change our codes of conduct to reflect the legislative requirements inside that. Additionally, we're working on an administrative procedure that sort of sits over top of that. To the question of trustee McMurphy, and this is something we intend to bring in June, one of the areas of requirement in our administrative procedure and in our codes of conduct is to ensure that equity of access to technologies in our schools is held as a priority. So whether that's a personal device or access to computers and digital resources at the school level, that would be a priority anyway. The main thrust of the personal devices, use of personal devices is around maximizing instructional time without interruption and ensuring that their use is commensurate to the age level of the students and also the instructional requirements inside the school day and adhering to that. So that's what we're working towards. But one of the areas specifically that we want to, we speak to in the AP and in the codes of conduct is equity of access and ensuring that students have that.
And so we can expect some
Yes.
further discussion about
Okay,
that.
that's
Thank you. Trustee Stilzer.
Thank you, Chair. Following up on trustee Daniel's question, with non-enrolling teachers and speech language pathologies, SPLs have been told to have cell phones as well.
Generally not. My understanding is only if they're itinerant. Maybe Director Westhaver knows.
To the chair, to board. SLP, speech and language, no, they would not have a cell phone. We do provide iPads for our SLPs, so they use that as a tool for working with kids, their students. Someone like Roger Dunn, of course, he has one, the outreach coordinator. And we provide them for our 3 advocates who will hear from at our next interactions. It's key for them to have a cell phone as they work with amongst the students in the zones and schools.
Yes, Mr. Reed.
The guideline that we have is where an employee conducts more than 50% of the work in the field, so they don't have a defined location. Then generally they would have a cell phone. So, for example, our facility supervisors would have a cell phone because they need to be contacted, and they're all around the district all day long.
Anything arising from this discussion further, trustees? Trustee Hickman?
I just had one question with regards to when the phones are being used for personal and there's a cost associated with that. Is the staff member provided with copies of the bill that show that and then they pay that, or does it come off their payroll? How is that?
We can't deduct it directly on payroll. They're requested to provide a reimbursement. Yeah, and in most cases, like they're in the district, there's a shared pool of data minutes, and so there are not often overages, but where there are, we ensure that they're recovered because personal use of phones resulting in cost to the district. And so that's kind of the principle behind the procedures.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So have we canvassed district phones enough, folks, before we lose them? All right, thank you. That then, trustees, completes the agenda. Is there any objection to adjourning the meeting at this time? Hearing no objection, I declare that we are adjourned, and I wish to thank you for your consideration and your contributions this evening. Enjoy some sun and warmth and light yet. Thank you.